When you think about your company's data, or, well, even your own personal data,
Yeah.
you probably picture it locked away inside some, impenetrable digital fortress.
Right. Totally.
You imagine these massive firewalls, state-of-the-art encryption algorithms, multi-factor authentication, and just teams of cybersecurity experts monitoring every single packet of data that moves across the network.
Oh, absolutely. It feels incredibly secure.
It does. It feels untouchable.
Yeah.
But I want you to imagine a completely different scenario for a second.
Okay, I'm with you.
What happens if a teenager, sitting in their bedroom halfway across the world, finds a public internet portal, guesses a default admin password, like, I don't know, admin 123, logs in, and just turns off the chilled water loop that cools the servers in your hyper-secure data center?
I mean, that is literally the ultimate nightmare scenario for a digital security team.
Really? Just turning off the water?
Oh, yeah, because in that exact moment, all your advanced encryption, all your multi-million-dollar firewalls, they mean absolutely nothing. Modern AI servers process incredible amounts of data, right? So they draw immense power and generate massive amounts of heat.
Right, they get incredibly hot.
Exactly. And without that chilled water absorbing and carrying the heat away, those servers overhear within seconds.
Seconds.
Not minutes.
Seconds. The safety protocols trigger, the systems crash, or, in the worst-case scenario, the hardware literally melts. It's binary. The physical environment ultimately dictates the digital reality.
That is just wild to think about. And that is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. Our mission today is to explore the invisible, deeply interconnected layers of security that actually run our modern world. We are pulling back the curtain on everything from the physical vulnerabilities quietly hiding inside state-of-the-art data centers to the incredibly high-stakes auditing frameworks that attempt to govern them.
Yeah, and we're even taking it all the way down to the human element. The bodyguards and security personnel navigating what is often just, frankly, smoke and mirrors protection. Right. And to do this, we've got an expansive journey ahead of us. What kind of sources are we looking at today?
We are looking at a really diverse stack. Highly technical facility infrastructure advisories, for one.
But really dense stuff.
Oh, very dense. We're also breaking down the world of SOC and SSAE audit frameworks to understand how companies, prove they are actually secure. And we are drawing from professional journals published by the International Protective Security Board.
Yeah, IPSB.
Exactly. That gives us a really sobering look into the realities of close protection and physical venue security.
It is a massive journey, literally from the microchips to the parking lots. And exploring the extreme nuances of physical and cyber defense is brought to you by CISOphysicalsecurity.com and CISOmarketplace.com.
Two incredible resources.
Absolutely. If you are dealing with these complex layers of risk, those are the resources you need to be looking at, and we'll touch on how they fit into this puzzle as we go. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with this concept of the cloud.
The famous cloud.
Right, because the cloud sounds ethereal. It sounds like data just lives in the air, floating around.
It really does. But the cloud is actually incredibly heavy. It's incredibly hot, and it's heavily reliant on massive physical infrastructure.
So that physical infrastructure is what we call the invisible attack surface, right?
Yes, exactly. When cybersecurity teams do their threat modeling, they are usually hyper-focused on servers, networks, and, cloud control planes. They are looking for software bugs.
Which makes sense because that's their job.
Right. But sitting right underneath all of that are three critical facility platforms that keep the entire building alive.
Okay, let's name them.
You've got building management systems, or BMS, electrical power management systems, EPMS, and data center infrastructure management platforms, the DCIM.
Okay, let's break down what these systems actually do mechanically, because they aren't managing the data itself, are they?
No, not at all. They are managing the environment the data lives in.
Okay, so the BMS is controlling those chilled water loops we talked about, right? The computer room air handlers, the variable frequency drives on the water pumps.
Exactly. And then the EPMS monitors the switchgear, the backup diesel generators, the uninterruptible power supplies.
So it keeps the lights on.
Yep. And then the DCIM tracks exactly where every single rack is located on the data center floor, literally down to the inch.
That's right. And what is fascinating here, and frankly terrifying when you look at the public research, is the maintenance fragility of these systems.
Oh, it's shocking.
Public data shows that there are tens of thousands of these data center management interfaces reachable directly from the public internet.
Tens of thousands just sitting out there.
And they are very often sitting there with default credentials, weak authentication, and missing basic protections like VPNs or jump hosts.
Yeah, I have to stop you there because that makes zero sense to me.
I know, right?
If I am a multi-billion-dollar cloud provider housing the world's most sensitive AI data, why on earth aren't these systems just behind a VPN?
It's a great question.
I mean, connecting a state-of-the-art AI cluster to an unpatched public-facing cooling interface is like putting a Formula One engine inside a car with wooden brakes.
That's a great analogy.
The sheer power of the system becomes the exact thing that destroys it if the foundational mechanics fail. Why leave it exposed?
It really comes down to a classic tension in security. Convenience versus protection combined with, like, severe organizational silos.
Ah, the silos.
Yeah. Facility software is often maintained by completely different teams than the core IT infrastructure. You have facility managers, HVAC technicians, electrical integrators, or third-party break-fix vendors.
Right, these aren't the software engineers.
Exactly. These are people in hard hats constantly driving from site to site. They want to be able to pull up a web portal on their tablet from their truck to check a cooling threshold or acknowledge a generator alarm.
And they don't want to authenticate through a complex corporate VPN jump host every single time.
Exactly. It's an operational shortcut that compromises the entire building.
Mm.
And furthermore, from what we are looking at in the sources, these platforms are sometimes maintained by very small vendor teams or even open source communities.
Which brings us to the OpenDCIM example. That completely blew my mind.
Yes, the OpenDCIM project perfectly illustrates this fragility. It is a widely deployed open source platform.
Used everywhere, right?
Yeah, used in both academic and commercial data centers all over the world to manage infrastructure inventory. Well, in 2025, the lead maintainer of that project announced their retirement.
Just walked away.
And at the time of that announcement, there was no successor identified to take over the code base.
Wow. So if I'm a facility operator, what happens the day after that maintainer retires?
Well, if a new critical vulnerability is discovered in that software tomorrow, you are suddenly left without a clear path for security updates or patches.
You're just on your own.
Your foundational facility management tool is effectively abandoned. If you've left it exposed to the internet for the convenience of your remote HVAC staff, you are a sitting duck.
Because there is no patch coming.
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we can walk through exactly how a threat actor exploits this mechanic.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the DCIM mapped attack scenario. It doesn't start with a sophisticated zero-day exploit designed by a nation-state.
No, it starts much simpler.
It starts with an attacker just running an automated script, scanning the entire internet, looking for an exposed DCIM login page.
And they find one.
They find one, and because the facility team prioritized convenience, the attacker logs in using weaker default credentials.
Unbelievable. And once they are in, they aren't looking to steal customer data, are they?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They're looking at the architectural map.
Mm.
The DCIM inventory shows them the entire floor plan. It shows them exactly which racks belong to which corporate tenants.
So they can see where the targets are?
Exactly. It highlights where the high-density GPU clusters are located, the really expensive, power-hungry stuff used for AI training.
Right.
Most importantly, it shows them exactly which power feeds and which specific mechanical cooling zones serve those precise racks.
Okay, let me make sure I'm getting the tactical advantage here. If I am an attacker and I want to disrupt a specific high-value tenant, maybe a corporate competitor or a geopolitical target, I don't need to spend months trying to breach their digital network or decrypt their traffic.
Cool.
I just use the data center's own DCIM to figure out exactly which power cable feeds their specific servers.
You just look it up in their own system.
And then I plan a highly targeted physical disruption. I just virtually turn off their power, or I shut down their specific cooling valve and let their servers bake in their own heat.
That is the exact mechanism. You use the physical environment to completely bypass the digital security.
That's terrifying.
It is. And this vulnerability isn't just coming from the internet. We also have to look at massive vulnerabilities in the supply chain itself. This introduces the concepts of malicious or compromised insiders and in-transit adversaries.
Right, an in-transit adversary is someone who physically tampers with the hardware before it ever reaches the secured data center environment.
Like that was on a truck.
Yeah, this happens during manufacturing, warehousing, or shipping. If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the compromised system integrator baseline scenario.
Okay. What is a system integrator?
A system integrator is a third-party organization that takes individual components, motherboards, GPUs, network cards, and assembles them into complete, ready-to-deploy racks before shipping them to the final cloud provider.
So they build the physical server.
Right, so in this scenario, a massive cloud provider orders high-end GPU servers. The integrator assembles them, racks them, and installs the base operating system and firmware during staging at their own warehouse.
Okay, so the fully built server racks arrive at the massive hyper-secure data center. The cloud provider does their standard onboarding checks.
Yeah, they plug them in, make sure the systems boot up, they pass the basic network health checks.
But the provider does not independently reverse engineer and verify every single line of code in that pre-installed OS image.
They simply don't have the time or resources to do that for tens of thousands of servers. They trust the integrator.
And that's the vulnerability.
Exactly. But in this baseline scenario, that pre-installed operating system image contains a persistent backdoor. It was put there by a compromised insider at the integrator's warehouse before the server ever left the loading dock.
Oh, wow.
And that backdoor easily survives the cloud provider's standard health checks. So now you have a compromised machine sitting deep inside the impenetrable fortress, hardwired into the high-speed network.
The call is literally coming from inside the house. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If your company is evaluating a cloud provider or renting nodes for your own AI development, you can't just take their marketing brochure's word for it.
You definitely cannot.
You have to actively verify the isolation. And the sources give very specific, actionable advice on how to test this.
Yeah, because the facility infrastructure sits almost entirely on the provider side, you have to run your own diagnostic queries from your rented server node to see what the network actually looks like from the inside.
What kind of queries?
This involves running diagnostic commands like ibstat, sakari, ibdivinfo, and sminfo.
I want to break down what those commands are actually doing because it sounds like InfiniBand fabric diagnostics.
Yeah.
When a listener's engineering team runs those, what physical reality are they trying to expose?
They are probing the underlying network fabric to see how much of it they can enumerate or basically map out. If you rent a cluster of servers, you should absolutely be able to see enough network information to operate your own assigned ports. But if you run those queries and you can suddenly map unrelated tenants, or see the wider switch topology of the entire data center, or access management plane details outside your allocation, well, that is a massive architectural red flag.
It's like checking into a hotel room, looking at your peephole, and somehow being able to see directly into the room across the hall, the manager's office, and the security desk.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It proves the provider has weak fabric partitioning. You are seeing things you have no business seeing, which guarantees someone else could see you.
It's a total structural failure of isolation. You also need to aggressively interrogate the provider's trust documentation.
What are we looking for there?
You need to explicitly look for how facility controls are governed. But even more crucially, you need to look for where the documentation is silent. You have to ask them directly, how is integrator remote access governed? Is it time-bound? Is it individually attributed and logged? Are your building management interfaces internet exposed?
Because if you don't ask, they aren't going to volunteer the fact that their cooling pumps are reachable via a public IP address.
Exactly.
Now, claiming that all these physical and supply chain controls exist is one thing. Putting it in a glossy PDF is easy. But actually proving it to a client, proving that your data center is legitimately physical secure, requires a rigorous, verified standard.
It does.
We have to look at how these facilities are actually built and audited, because it's a completely different world from standard IT security.
Right. To understand what a proper physical environment looks like, before we even discuss the audits, we can look at the Entrust PKI as a service framework.
That document is fascinating.
It really is. It gives us a deep mechanical blueprint of a Tier 3 data center's physical controls. And it is incredibly rigorous.
It reads like something out of a spy movie, honestly.
Yeah.
They rely heavily on hardware security modules, or HSMs. Now, usually we just call these like devices that safeguard digital keys. But mechanically, what does an HSM actually do that makes it so secure?
So an HSM is a dedicated crypto processor. It's a physical computing device designed specifically to generate, store, and manage digital cryptographic keys.
Go ahead.
It never lets the keys leave the device in an unencrypted state, but the physical security is where it gets truly fascinating.
Tell me about the mesh.
Yeah, they are built with active tamper-evident meshes. If someone tries to physically drill into the casing or alter the temperature to freeze the memory chips or change the voltage, the HSM detects the physical intrusion and instantly zeroizes.
It wipes itself.
Yep, it wipes its own memory. It destroys the keys before the attacker can get them.
And even getting to the HSM is a massive logistical hurdle. The documentation states these HSMs are stored in two-person controlled safes. I want to emphasize how that works.
It's not just a safe with two locks.
Right. It's a system designed around split knowledge. One administrator might have the combination to the outer door, and a completely different security officer has the physical key for the inner chassis.
So one person alone, physically, cannot access the hardware.
It fundamentally breaks the concept of a single malicious insider.
It forces collusion if you want to compromise the system, which is exponentially harder to pull off. And it goes way beyond just the locks on the doors. Look at how they handle environmental threats, specifically fire.
This part is so cool.
The facility is fully wired for fire detection and suppression, but they use what's called a pre-action fire suppression system.
I really wanted to bring this up because the engineering is just brilliant. Usually when you picture a fire sprinkler, you think of pipes full of pressurized water just waiting for a glass bulb to break from heat, and then it instantly floods the room.
Which would be bad in a data center.
Very bad. In a data center holding tens of millions of dollars of sensitive electronics, an accidental discharge of a traditional sprinkler would be just as catastrophic as an actual fire.
A single faulty sprinkler head could bankrupt a company. So a pre-action system changes the mechanics. The pipes traversing the controlled server space are actually completely empty.
No water in them at all.
None. They are filled with compressed air, not water. The water is held back by an electronic valve outside the server room. The water pipes only fill when multiple independent fire alarms are triggered simultaneously.
Like what kind of alarms?
Usually a combination of a smoke detector and a rapid heat rise sensor.
It requires a confirmed multi-sensor threat to even introduce water into the environment.
Exactly.
And even then, the water doesn't spray until the individual sprinkler head above the actual fire melts. It mitigates the risk of accidental water damage completely. They even specify that electromagnetic media, like backup tape drives, are stored deliberately away from obvious sources of strong magnetic fields.
Like massive power transformers or elevator motors.
Right. To prevent accidental wiping, every tiny physical variable is engineered out.
And validating that these exact types of rigorous, minute facility controls are actually built correctly and functioning as promised is exactly why CISOphysicalsecurity.com is such a vital resource for professionals.
Because you can't just take the data center's word that their pre-action sprinklers work.
You can't. You need an established, legally binding framework to audit these environments.
Which brings us to the evolution of these audits. If we look at the industry a few years ago, SSAE 16 was the gold standard for compliance. Now, everything has moved to SSAE 18. I want to figure out why the industry made that shift. What was fundamentally broken or flawed about SSAE 16 that required an entirely new regulatory standard?
The shift from 16 to 18 was essentially about closing massive systemic loopholes regarding accountability and the reality of the modern supply chain.
Okay, let's start with accountability.
Well, SSAE stands for Statement on Standards for Attestation Engagements, established by the American Institute of CPAs. Under SSAE 16, a service organization, like a data center, had to provide a management assertion letter.
And this is basically a document stating, we have designed and implemented these specific security controls, right?
Right. But here is the flaw. Under SSAE 16, that management assertion letter didn't actually need to be signed by management.
Wait, really? It wasn't signed.
Not required to be signed.
It's like handing a client a multi-million-dollar security contract and saying, here are our promises, but the CEO isn't going to put their name on the bottom line in ink. It gives them plausible deniability if something goes wrong.
It led to a much less formal acknowledgement of responsibility. If a control failed, management could just point fingers at the IT department.
Oh, I see.
SSAE 18 fixes that by legally forcing a signed management assertion letter. It locks in real personal accountability for the executives making these claims. They are legally attesting that the controls are real.
The other massive structural shift is how they handle vendor management. SSAE 16 only really cared about auditing your own house. It looked at what your direct employees did. But SSAE 18 massively expands the scope to include subservice organizations.
Yeah, if we think back to the supply chain issues we discussed earlier, this is the regulatory response. In the modern cloud era, no company does everything themselves.
Not at all.
You outsource your facility cooling, you outsource your physical security guards to a staffing agency, you outsource your hardware integration. SSAE 18 recognizes that your security is only as strong as your weakest vendor.
So you can no longer just audit your own internal IT processes.
Exactly. You are now required to audit the third-party janitorial staff cleaning your server rooms,
Yeah.
the third-party guards at your doors, and the integrators assembling your servers.
SSAE 18 basically proved that in the modern world, your digital perimeter isn't defined by your firewall, it's defined by the lowest paid subcontractor working for your third-party vendor.
That's the stark reality.
Then there's the issue of CUECs, which stands for Complementary User Entity Controls. Under SSAE 16, companies would often just throw in a massive kitchen sink list of controls.
Just everything they could think of.
They would list necessary controls, completely unnecessary controls, things that had nothing to do with the actual security objective, just to make the audit report look thicker and more impressive.
It was security by volume. It created massive confusion and inefficiency. Auditors and clients had to sift through hundreds of pages of irrelevant processes trying to find the actual security mechanisms.
Nightmare for the auditors.
Oh, total nightmare. SSAE 18 strictly redefines CUECs as only the essential, necessary controls needed to achieve management's-specific security objectives.
Like what?
Things like logical access termination procedures or specific data backup frequencies. It forces precision.
So SSAE 18 is the underlying auditing standard, the rulebook.
Yeah.
But when a company actually generates a report based on those rules to give to a client, they produce a SOC report, System and Organization Controls. I want to break down SOC1, SOC2, and SOC3 because they sound interchangeable, but they measure completely different realities. How does an auditor actually test these?
Think of them as different diagnostic tools for different audiences. SOC1 is entirely focused on financial reporting risks. It is crucial for companies that need to comply with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act.
Okay, so SOX compliance.
Yeah. If you are a massive payroll processor and a bug in your system could materially impact a Fortune 500 client's financial statements, you need a SOC1 report. The auditors are verifying that your math and your data entry controls are flawless.
Okay, so SOC1 protects the money.
Yeah.
But if someone is hosting a proprietary AI model or sensitive healthcare data, they don't necessarily care about financial SOX compliance. They care about corporate espionage. They care about uptime.
That is exactly where SOC2 comes in. SOC2 shifts entirely away from financial data and focuses heavily on the protection of the actual operational environment. It's built on 5 trust services criteria:
Which are?
security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy.
What does that actually look like in practice? How does an auditor test availability without shutting the data center down?
Well, they don't pull the plug, obviously, but they audit the mechanical redundancy. They will physically inspect the backup diesel generators. They will look at the maintenance logs.
Checking the actual physical gear.
Right. They will trace the power routing to ensure there is no single point of failure between the municipal grid and the server rack. To test security, they will watch a physical badge swipe at a secure door and then go check the database to ensure that specific swipe was logged with the correct timestamp and user ID.
That is very thorough.
It is. A SOC2 report contains all of these detailed testing procedures and the raw results. Because it exposes the exact inner workings of the security apparatus, it is a highly restricted document, usually only shared under a strict non-disclosure agreement.
And then there is SOC3. This is often described as the public face. It focuses on the same trust criteria as SOC2, but it strips out all the detailed auditor tests and the sensitive descriptions of the internal controls.
Right, it's just the summary.
It's meant to be freely distributed for marketing purposes. You can literally put a SOC3 seal on your website homepage. So I have to ask, if SOC3 strips out all the gritty details and it's basically just a shiny PR sticker for the marketing team, why should you, the listener, actually care about it if you see it on a vendor's website? Isn't it just a participation trophy?
It's a valid skepticism, but no, it is absolutely not a participation trophy.
They're not.
Because a SOC3 certification is completely impossible to get without first successfully completing the rigorous SOC2 examination.
Oh, I see.
The auditor has to do all the intense, deep dive mechanical testing required for SOC2 behind the scenes. The SOC3 report is simply the public-facing attestation certifying that the organization passed that rigorous standard.
So a SOC3 is basically the diploma on the doctor's wall. It doesn't show you their raw test scores or the exams they took, but they couldn't legally hang it there if they hadn't passed the medical boards.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Seeing the SOC3 seal guarantees a verified baseline of operational security, even if they aren't publishing their raw testing data on the public internet.
Okay, let's synthesize where we are. We've talked about securing the physical hardware, the chilled water loops, and the pre-action sprinklers.
Yep.
We've talked about the incredibly dense frameworks, the SSE 18s and the SOC audits, required to legally prove those systems are designed correctly.
Right.
But an audit only proves that you have the framework in place. A framework is a static set of rules and technologies. It doesn't tell us who is actually sitting in the chair staring at the monitors when a real dynamic threat occurs at 3:00 a.m.
Exactly. The static framework is completely useless without dynamic monitoring. And that leads us directly into the operational side of security. How do you actually watch these environments in real time?
To understand this, we need to dive into the International Protected Security Board, or IPSB journal. This outlines the critical mechanical differences between the two main hubs of operational security, the ARC and the SOC. And just to be clear for everyone listening, in this context, SOC means Security Operations Center, not the audit report we just talked about.
Right. Good distinction.
Let's define the ARC first. What are they actually looking at?
The ARC is the Alarm Receiving Center. This is the physical hub. The ARC is entirely focused on the tangible physical world. ARC personnel monitor intrusion detection systems, fire alarms, and CCTV surveillance feeds.
So cameras and door sensors.
Yeah. When a perimeter fence is cut, or a secure door is propped open, or a motion sensor trips in a restricted hallway, the ARC receives that alert. They verify the authenticity of the alarm, usually by pulling up the corresponding camera feed to see if it's a person or just a stray animal, and then they dispatch a physical response, like armed guards or police.
They're the watchers on the physical wall.
Yeah.
And then you have the SOC, the Security Operations Center. This is the digital hub.
Right. The SOC leverages advanced cybersecurity tools like SIEMs or security information and event management systems to monitor the digital network.
They're looking at code, basically.
SOC analysts are looking at log files. They are trained to identify anomalous behavioral patterns, investigate malware signatures, track phishing attacks, and mitigate data exfiltration. They are looking for unauthorized digital access or lateral movement within the network.
So traditionally, the ARC and the SOC lived in completely different worlds, both physically and culturally. The ARC was usually in a basement somewhere with a bunch of monitors showing grainy camera feeds, staffed by guys with law enforcement or military backgrounds.
Definitely.
And the SOC was a high-tech room with glowing dashboards staffed by IT and cybersecurity engineers. But the IPSB journal introduces this concept of holistic security, arguing that in the modern era, maintaining that separation is a fatal flaw.
You simply cannot maintain the silo, because modern threats don't respect the boundary between physical and digital. The two worlds are entirely interconnected. A holistic approach utilizes software to correlate events from both the physical ARC and the digital SOC simultaneously to understand the true nature of an incident.
Let's ground this in a practical analogy for the listener. Imagine you work at a massive corporate headquarters. If your ARC, your physical security team, sees your employee badge being scanned to enter the lobby in New York at 9:00 a.m., well, that's normal. Nothing to worry about.
Completely routine.
Meanwhile, if your SOC, your cybersecurity team, sees your exact user credentials logging into the corporate network from an IP address in Russia at 9:00 a.m. and 3 seconds, it may just flag it as a routine remote login or a VPN anomaly.
But when you have a holistic system that ingests logs from both the badge readers and the Active Directory, the system correlates those two events instantly.
It connects the dots.
It realizes it is physically impossible for the same human being to be scanning a plastic badge in New York and typing a password from Russia 3 seconds later. The holistic system triggers a massive priority 1 alarm because it recognizes that either the physical badge is stolen or the digital credentials are compromised.
It's the synergy of the two systems that actually catches the threat. Neither team would have escalated it to a critical emergency on their own.
Exactly.
And navigating that exact intersection, figuring out how to integrate your physical building infrastructure logs with your digital risk management SIMs is a massively complex engineering and vendor selection process. That is exactly the kind of problem that our sponsor, CISOmarketplace.com, helps organizations solve.
It's a tough problem to solve manually.
Oh, absolutely. They help you find the right tools to connect those physical and digital dots so you aren't flying blind.
But this integration brings us to a really uncomfortable reality. We just talked about rigorous standards and human auditors verifying them. You can spend millions of dollars building a state-of-the-art holistic security system. You can have the best ARC integrating perfectly with the best SOC. You can pass your SSAE 18 audits with flying colors.
Sounds great on paper.
It does. But what happens when the human is the security control and there is no auditor watching them? If the human guard standing at the physical door is negligent, untrained, or compromised, the entire million-dollar system collapses instantly.
Which pivots us from the high-tech monitors and audit frameworks to the chaotic reality of physical venue security. We are stepping out of the data center and into the world of events, arenas, and close protection. The IPSB journal refers to a lot of what we see in the public sphere as smoke and mirror security.
It's a provocative term, but it describes a very specific, dangerous phenomenon. The logistical necessity of hiring bodies versus hiring actual professionals.
Right.
Think about massive public gatherings. We're talking about concerts, massive sporting events, amusement parks, or major political conventions.
And just to pause here for a second, the literature uses political conventions purely as an example of massive security deployments. We are neutrally reporting that inclusion without taking any partisan stance on the conventions themselves. We are strictly looking at the logistics of putting thousands of people in a room.
Exactly. The logistical nightmare of these mega events is that they require a massive temporary surge in security personnel. A stadium might need 500 guards for a Saturday night and 0 on Sunday.
You can't just keep them on staff.
Right. Venues cannot maintain that staff full-time, so they engage in high-volume, short-term hiring through third-party contractors. When the emphasis shifts to just getting enough bodies in yellow jackets to stand at every single door to satisfy insurance requirements, the vetting process plummets.
So who are they hiring?
Very often, the only baseline requirement for these short-term guards is passing a basic, no criminal record background check.
Which means they have zero experience, no situational awareness training, no de-escalation skills, and absolutely no dedication to the protective mission. They are just wearing a uniform for $15 an hour.
Sadly, yes.
And the sources provide two deeply unsettling anecdotes that perfectly illustrate how dangerous this smoke and mirrors illusion really is when tested.
The first example highlights pure, staggering incompetence driven by operational pressure.
Tell me about this one.
The author of the journal, who is a security professional with decades of experience, describes attending a concert as a regular guest. He walks up to the main security checkpoint, and the guard stops him to scan him with a handheld metal detector wand.
Standard procedure.
The guard sweeps the wand up and down his arms and legs, clears him, and lets him through. But the author looked down at the wand during the sweep.
And?
The power switch was in the off position.
The guard wasn't actually scanning for anything. They were just performing the physical pantomime of security.
Just going through the motions.
Why would they do that? Likely because the line was backing up, people were getting angry, and the guard prioritized the illusion of screening over the reality of actual screening just to keep the crowd moving.
Yep.
The hundreds of people who walked through that checkpoint assumed they were entering a safe, sterile environment, but in reality, anyone could have brought a weapon inside.
The visual presence of the guard creates a false sense of security. But the second anecdote, the Denker example, is much darker because it highlights the reality of the insider threat.
This one is chilling.
Denker was an inexperienced, minimally vetted security guard hired for a high-profile arena environment. Because he was wearing the official uniform, he was granted a massive amount of assumed trust and unscreened access within the venue.
The uniform is essentially a physical bypass code. He didn't have to go through the metal detectors. He could walk right past the restricted area signs, and no one questioned it because he looked like he belonged.
Exactly. And Denker leveraged that trusted position to actively stalk the venue's cheerleaders.
That is just horrifying.
He used his official security access to bypass locked doors, enter their locker rooms, access their personal schedules, and find opportunities to isolate them away from public view. He turned the very system designed to protect people into a logistical weapon to prey on them.
This raises a massive systemic question for anyone managing risk. If the venue automatically trusts the security guard, just because they are wearing a yellow jacket provided by a lowest bidder contractor who is securing the security.
That's the million-dollar question.
If your perimeter is porous because of operational incompetence or actively hostile because of a malicious insider, the entire venue is compromised.
This widespread unpredictability in venue security forces professional close protection operators, the elite bodyguards, to completely rethink how they operate.
They can't just trust the venue.
When they bring a VIP into an arena, they know they absolutely cannot rely on the venue security staff to protect their client. They have to assume the venue security is flawed, and they must create and maintain their own, highly controlled, self-contained protective sphere.
Which forces us to completely redefine how we look at the physical threat landscape.
Hmm.
When most people imagine an assassination attempt or a targeted attack on a VIP, they picture Hollywood scenarios.
Like a movie.
Right. A sniper setting up on a rooftop 3 weeks in advance, or someone planting a complex explosive device under a stage. And while those threats certainly exist, the tactical reality of modern attacks is much faster, much closer, and requires far less planning.
Using the Mateen and Long case studies as examples of determined modern enemies, the IPSB Journal argues that the focus of close protection must urgently shift to the parking lot. The parking lot is ground zero.
Walk me through the mechanics of that. Why the parking lot and not the lobby or the stage?
Because modern targeted attackers largely ply their trade by utilizing vehicles for rapid deployment and surprise. They don't want a prolonged standoff with security inside a building where they can be cornered.
They want in and out.
They pull up to the scene in a vehicle, they unload their weapons rapidly, and they move straight to direct action. The parking lot is the transitional space. It's the moment of maximum vulnerability where the client moves from the heavily armored, mobile safe room of their vehicle to a vulnerable pedestrian state.
So if a close protection operator is inside the building, spending 2 hours sweeping the VIP green room for electronic bugs, but ignoring the chaotic, unvetted environment of the parking lot right outside the door, they are missing the most likely avenue of a kinetic attack.
Completely missing it.
The perimeter isn't the front door of the building. The perimeter is the edge of the asphalt.
Exactly. But protecting the principal, the VIP, isn't just about scanning the asphalt for threats and being a big person in a suit. The concept of the protective sphere is a fascinating psychological and logistical web. It is incredibly complex because a principal is a human being, not a static server rack.
A principal isn't an isolated asset. They bring their entire life with them. The protective sphere includes their family, their peers, their educators, their nannies, and their digital footprint.
All of it.
And every single one of those nodes introduces new, unpredictable variables that the security team has to constantly manage.
The journal highlights a highly relatable but tactically terrifying example of this family dynamic vulnerability. Imagine the principal has a teenage daughter.
Yeah.
It's a Friday night, and the teenage daughter desperately wants to go out with her friends to a highly public, unvetted location. But the security team has evaluated the current threat status, maybe there's local political unrest, or a specific elevated threat made against the family online, and the protocol strictly prohibits her from leaving the secure compound.
Under standard operational procedure, the answer is a hard no. The risk matrix says the environment is too dangerous.
But the principal doesn't want to deal with the screaming match. They don't want the family drama of telling their teenager they are a prisoner in their own home.
Right, their parents first.
Exactly. So to avoid the emotional confrontation, the principal overrules the security team, ignores the professional risk assessment, and lets the daughter go out.
This is a critical psychological insight. This is where the threat shifts entirely from the outside to the inside. The security model wasn't broken by a hostile attacker with a weapon. It was broken by the client giving in to convenience and emotional pressure.
It happens all the time.
Misinterpreting these behaviors or failing to manage the emotional dynamics of the client's family creates a massive vulnerability. The bodyguard has to be part tactical commander and part family diplomat. They have to convince the principal to accept the restriction without alienating them.
Which requires an incredibly specialized skill set that goes far beyond physical intimidation. The modern operator isn't just muscle.
Anymore.
The sources detail how professional protectors must undergo rigorous, standardized assessments, like the KSS standard, to prove they possess the right psychological demeanor. They have to be confident and accessible, yet completely unobtrusive. They need to blend into a high society event while maintaining total, lethal situational awareness.
You see this in how they are trained and tested. One of the assessment scenarios mentioned is the security advance party. Candidates are put into small groups and tasked with preparing for a principal's visit to something as mundane as a public cafeteria venue.
Sounds easy, right?
It sounds simple, but the logistics are staggering. They have to map the main entrances, the emergency exits, the sight lines from every window, the architectural choke points, the kitchen access doors, the public intermingling risks, all for a 30-minute lunch meeting.
They are essentially building a temporary mobile physical security framework on the fly. And the required skill sets keep expanding due to systemic societal changes.
Like what?
Well, post-COVID, the landscape of emergency response has fundamentally changed. The literature stresses that sophisticated medical training, like tactical trauma care, is no longer just a nice bonus for a security detail. It is an absolute must-have capability.
Because the medical sector is still struggling with severe scarcities of hospital and emergency medical staff, you cannot rely on the assumption that an ambulance will magically appear in 3 minutes.
You can't. If the principal or anyone in the protective sphere suffers trauma, a heart attack, or a medical emergency, the close protection operator must be physically capable of intervening and sustaining life until those strained municipal emergency services can finally arrive.
They are the first responder.
Yes.
And carrying the immense weight of the tactical threats, the family diplomacy, the logistical planning, and the medical readiness takes a massive psychological toll on the operators themselves. Stress management isn't just about feeling good or taking a vacation. It's a vital operational security protocol.
The journal emphasizes that operators must proactively manage their own stress through mindfulness practices and learning how to effectively shift gears.
Shift gears.
Yeah, they have to know how to transition from a high-alert, hyper-vigilant operational status to necessary downtime. If an operator fails to manage that psychological stress, it leads rapidly to burnout. And burnout degrades cognitive function and situational awareness.
So they become a liability.
An exhausted, burnt-out elite protector can very quickly turn into a massive inside liability. They might miss the subtle behavioral cues of an attacker in the parking lot, or snap at the client's family, which degrades that critical trust and makes the client less likely to follow their safety directives in the future.
The human element is the ultimate single point of failure. So let's synthesize this massive journey we've been on today. We started in the cold, humming aisles of AI data centers, looking at the mechanical vulnerabilities of chill water loops and the completely unpatched DCIM platforms that facility managers leave exposed to the public internet out of sheer convenience.
And we looked at how supply chains can introduce persistent backdoors before the server is even plugged in.
We moved through the rigorous, unforgiving world of corporate accountability, the shift to SSAE 18, the legal necessity of signed executive assertions, and the vital role of SOC audits, enforcing companies to actually prove their physical and digital controls function properly under pressure.
Right, and then we looked at the holistic merging of the physical ARC and the digital SOC, realizing that modern threats don't respect the artificial boundaries between a plastic door badge and an IP address.
And finally, we brought it all the way down to the messy reality of the human element. The dangerous illusion of smoke and mirrors venue security, the tactical reality of the parking lot ambush, and the incredible psychological complexity of a professional bodyguard trying to protect a stubborn teenager.
It is a vast, deeply interconnected ecosystem where a failure at the mechanical facility level, the corporate audit level, or the individual human level can compromise the entire structure.
I want to seamlessly send a final thank you to our sponsors, asaphysicalsecurity.com and CISOmarketplace.com, for supporting this incredibly comprehensive deep dive into the invisible systems that keep us safe.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own, building on the mechanisms we've laid out today.
Lay it on us.
We spend so much time, billions of dollars, and endless cycles of anxiety worrying about the sophisticated zero-day exploit attacking our data from a server across the globe. But considering the smoke and mirrors of everyday physical security and the absolute fragility of the human element that governs access, you should ask yourself something.
Okay, what is it?
How strong is the physical lock on the door protecting your most sensitive digital device right now? Who actually has the key to the room where your server lives? Your digital paranoia might be world-class, but does your physical reality match it?
It's a question that completely changes how you look at the physical world around you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and keep questioning the invisible systems that run your life.